This is Bad Movies We Love, part of the Sheist Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it is I, your host, Nick Sheist, and we're back for Season 2, Episode 12, moving right along. We've got some good stuff on the horizon coming up for you, including Showgirls and Morbius. If there's a movie you'd like me to cover on the show, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please reach out to me at Bad Movies We Love with an LUV on Twitter or Instagram, or you could email me at nick@thesheist.com. I'd love to hear from you. And today I'm talking to my friend Kevin from the Sheist International Film Club. And, you know, sometimes when you record a podcast with people from all over the world and there's a giant ocean in between the two of you, audio fidelity is not always fantastic, and we faced that hurdle with this episode. I did my best, and I hope that it works for you. So without further ado, join us as we dive into the mystery of the action comedy Hudson Hawk from 1991. He must have just read the script and been like, oh yeah, this is a joke, right? So I'm just going to have fun with it.
That's a very jarring shift in tone.
Yeah, Aiello looks like he's out for like a casual like paddle boating experience.
But not even a 1 second gag, and it's like, what was that exactly?
You know, his stunt double's in there throwing like spinning back kicks to the body.
Hey mister, are you gonna die?
He communicates through a collection of business cards that he has like pre-printed with messages on them.
Somebody loses their head, we'll say.
Did I just hear that correctly? And of course I did, because I had the subtitles on. Kevin, greetings. Thank you so much. I know it's evening for you. It's late morning for me. But thank you for joining me to talk about Hudson Hawk, and welcome to the show. Can you tell me what it was that made you suggest this movie? I know you reached out to me. You wanted to do an episode of the show, but what was it that made Hudson Hawk come to mind?
I think Hudson Hawk kind of is. I remember when I started getting into movies, like seriously, back in the 90s. Hudson Hawk was the de facto kind of buzz of every joke, of every like, is it a bigger flop? It was kind of, it was de facto joke about the vanity project and stuff like that. And it was a film that I ended up enjoying more than I thought I would back in the 90s, and I revisited it a couple of years ago, and it was better than I remembered even. It's not like, you know, I have it on my letterbox. I think I gave it like 3 stars. Like objectively, to me it's 3 stars, but there's a lot that I love in this film that hopefully we can get into some of that. There's so many film podcasts out there, and they talk about, I don't cover this movie for some reason, even though it's such a high-profile disaster at the time. So I always enjoy it.
Yeah, this is a 1992 movie, released in 92, I think. So it's, you know, coming on the heels of, Die Hard, maybe even Die Hard 2. But Bruce Willis is a bona fide action star at this point in his career. And I think some of maybe the expectation of what this movie was supposed to be versus what it is kind of collided. And maybe that's where some of the negativity came in, because, as you know, your wife had just popped in and I was asking you whether or not she liked this movie. You said, you know, within the first 5 minutes she was out of it, and at that point, you know, Bruce Willis isn't even in the movie. this is all going on in Italy in the past, and if you had bought tickets to go see a movie, knowing that you like Die Hard and that this was like sort of a action heist movie, and you walk in and you've got Leonardo da Vinci accidentally like inventing a gold conversion machine, I could understand you not knowing what the hell was going on and feeling like maybe you got cheated a little bit out of what you expected.
Yeah, I can see that. Sorry, I was just saying I think you put up the poster on Twitter, and it's like catch the excitement, catch the adventure, catch the hawk, and like you said, the first 5 minutes is set in like Renaissance Italy. Every character is speaking Italian, and there's no subtitles.
Nope.
And you have this kind of narrator cracking jokes as well. Um, yeah, so it's a really kind of strange kind of setup for a film. I suppose the kind of story to it, as much as what I know from what I've read, is that it was a song back in the early 80s and they were trying to make a film out of it. And when Bruce Willis told Joel Silver about this, Joel Silver was like, absolutely. And I think originally it was written as a straight up action film. And then Bruce Willis was like, no, let's do something else. So I think he probably thought it was like, okay, I can do a bit of comedy, I can do some action, I can do some singing, which is what he was really into at the time. It just ends up being a mess of a film.
It was interesting to see him in this role at this time, and it's like he's not a bad comedic actor at all. When he went on and did Whole Nine Yards and Whole 10 Yards, like a little bit later in his career, he got to have fun with it, and then towards the later end of his career, he was doing a lot of sort of like straight to video action films where he was almost like doing kind of like what Nicolas Cage did, where he's taking a lot of smaller projects but working a lot and sort of being like the one big name that's in the film. So, especially with what's gone on with his health over the last couple of years, it's really sad because he was such a talented actor, and him and Danny Aiello do all the singing of their own songs in this. So, like you said about him wanting to maybe incorporate that and have some creative freedom in terms of what he's bringing to the screen as this character, I think we got sort of like a pretty well-rounded uh, Bruce Willis experience. So even in Die Hard, like he cracks jokes, he has a sense of humor, but it's very tonally different than this movie. And here it's like a lot more slapsticky. There's some jokes that we'll get to that I can't believe I actually made it to being in a film at some point. And it was a lot of fun. And honestly, like I thought that I had seen this movie, but I hadn't. The movie that I'm thinking of was a different Bruce Willis movie from the 90s. And I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's the one where he's on the boat. Is that Striking Distance? Yeah,
That's
okay.
like,
So yes, I confused this. So this is the first time I had ever seen Hudson Hawk, but this whole time I thought that I had seen it, thinking it was this other movie. So I got to go into this cold, and I'm thinking like, this isn't how I remember this movie starting. And then when when it's very clear that I have no idea what I'm watching, it becomes a lot more enjoyable because it's just so zany, and I can't really fathom that this got approved at any level because it's way too funny to be like a typical action film. So it doesn't really fit the mold for that. But the action is, fairly reasonable in terms of like there's a lot of fight scenes, there's a reasonable amount of explosions. So it's like a little too action heavy to be your standard comedy. But he still goes from, I think he was in Rikers in New York, gets let out, and then they travel across the globe. So it's an adventure film as well. And it checks a lot of boxes that typically don't get checked together. And I felt that the tone for the movie was kind of in line with almost like Tim Burton's Batman but also maybe something like Naked Gun. So it has
Yeah.
it has a very particular like visual style to it, especially with all of the supporting cast, like the James Coburns and the what's his name, the big guy, Andrew Binyarski and David Caruso, and like that
Oh yeah.
group of people. Sandra Bernhardt's character is incredibly weird. Richard E. Grant as well. Like they're all almost like cartoon supervillain type characters, and you've got
Yeah.
sort of like the Suicide Squad on one side, and then you've got like the rich sort of Lex Luthor types that are sort of scheming and not really. I mean, they're not quite as they're not anywhere near as bright as a Lex Luthor, but they're rich and they're powerful and they have this scheme that's going to give them more power. And just all of it, I'm like, I was just so taken aback by experiencing all of these things in the same movie. And I'm so glad that I got to watch it for the first time. And I'm so happy that you brought a movie like this to the show. I mean, it has, a 5.7 on IMDb. That's like fair. It's like, I understand that, right? Like you said, 3 stars. That's about a 6 out of 10. Its Metascore is terrible at 17. So we're going to take a look at some of those reviews later. But you and I had talked, and you had said that you were going to try to watch this again. Did you get a chance to sit down and go through it all?
I did, yes. I sat down and watched it last night, and I took notes. I was very studious. Not like paragraphs or like that, but I was just taking down bullet points of things as they happen. When Bruce Willis gets in a fight with James Coburn later on, and James Coburn is slapping him back and forth, and he's really overacting it. And like you said, the Naked Gun parts, yeah, I was watching it going, there was a couple of jokes that felt like something of Airplane or Hot Shots, or part where he's running across the roof of the Vatican. He starts hitting the TV with his big, cane or it's called. It's like, that's a real, like, Abraham Zucker joke. There's loads of little asides like that. There was a Richard E. Grant's little, like, he has a fax machine in the car and he throws the paper through the shredder, and shredded paper shoots out the back of the car. It's like, that's such a really weird, particular choice that they made. Like, they're not even a 1 second gag, and it's like, what was that exactly?
Yeah, it's happening like in the background.
Yeah, it's so strange. I think what you're saying with Bruce Willis's humor. I think Bruce Willis's humor works best when he's kind of playing that kind of deadpan, jokey style of humor. Like he tries to play this like really big with terms of like his jokes, and some of the jokes he has are just it's almost like they're overthought, I suppose. There's one, I don't know if we're going to get to it, where he fights the butler near the end that has the 2 big knives that come out of the sleep. Somebody loses their head with the James Bond one-liner, but instead he goes, "Look, I'm down here. Looks like you won't be attending that hat convention in July." Really makes sense. But I still laughed at it because it's so stupid.
It has a lot of that, surprisingly, but like they have fun with it, and it's one thing to have something be stupid but not fit the tone, right? But it's another thing to have something be intentionally stupid, and like you said, sort of the joke structure of Richard E. Grant sitting in the back of the limo, getting a fax from one machine in his car, and then I don't even know if he reads it, and he just puts it straight into the paper shredder in the other side of the car and just shoots out the back.
Yeah.
That's such a particular choice, as you said, and it's all happening passively. Like he doesn't do anything to indicate that what just happened was important. It's just like a weird show of his wealth and his power in this moment, and it's one of these finely tuned things that happens in this movie. And another one that I really love before we get onto some other things, there's the Mario brothers of all things that are in the ambulance with Bruce Willis, and they're on like I guess it's the Brooklyn Bridge. It may not be. I don't know if it really was the Brooklyn Bridge, but they're in this ambulance chase. Bruce is hanging out in the back, and similar to that scene in the limo, there's a lady in a taxi who flicks her cigarette out the window, and Bruce catches it and smokes it, and then stops to just say, "Oh, gross, that's menthol," and then tosses it away. So, like, something like that is just
Yeah.
so weird to be happening in the middle of a very elaborate chase scene. Like, if it were Die Hard, like, maybe the cigarette gets flicked in his face and he kind of gives a passive, like, "Hey, lady, what are you doing?" type of moment of humor to her. But like,
Yeah.
this is a pretty big action piece to kind of stop it and to tell that joke in the middle of it. And I really enjoyed that the movie doesn't ever take itself too seriously to stop and have fun with that.
No, and I agree. Like, there's again when he's hanging off the back of the gurney, and this car just pulls up beside him, and this girl leans out. And she goes, "Hey, Mister, are you gonna die?" And it's like he doesn't ask for help. She doesn't do like anything. She doesn't like call the cops or anything like that. But yeah, it's just one of my favorite little gags was in that scene where he kind of the gurney kind of moves away from the ambulance and he gets to the toll bridge and he throws the change to the toll bridge and it's just I remember seeing that when I was young. I remember those one of the things that stuck in my mind. But yeah, like the action, like one of the notes that I have here is like you can't fault the production design, the sets, the props, the costumes. They're all like you can see that money was spent to make this film. They didn't. It's not like we're supposed to make purposely bad movies nowadays. Like this was like they were going for it with this. They had brought in the writer from Die Hard. They had brought in the writer and director from Heathers, I believe. This, and they're like they wanted to make something out of this. The cast is stacked, as the kids say. But like recently, I rewatched Ace Ventura, the first Ace Ventura, and there's a bit in Ace Ventura where the guy shoots at Ace Ventura during a car chase, and he catches the bullet in his teeth, and I was like, that feels like a joke out of Hudson Hawk. And then even watching the film again last night with Richard Grant, I was like, it feels like he's just a couple of steps away from what Jim Carrey was doing in Ace Ventura. Like he's jumping up on tables and he's, thrusting his hips and he's making these big gestures. And it's like, it feels like a performance that a lot of people saw and probably said, oh, maybe I could take one or two things from this. And I'd read some bits from Richard Grant's book about his performance, especially. Bruce Willis kept telling him to go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. And then when Bruce Willis had moved away from earshot, the director was like, "Yeah, don't take it down a couple of notches, please." So that kind of speaks to it was slightly turmoil on set, which kind of resulted in what we got. But yeah, it's just such a fascinating just collage of things. Like you say, a heist movie, and then there's like it's like the Blues Brothers with the musical numbers, and like big action scenes. Like there's when that ambulance crashes, like that's a big ambulance flip and explosion of the whole thing. And there were a couple of stunts where they like jumped off roofs that reminded me of that bit in Lethal Weapon. It's a real time capsule. And this is the way I read it. This is what Bruce Willis thought. Yeah, this is the movie I want because it's his only story credit. So like Bruce Willis in his head was like, this is what I think at this point in my life a film should be. And even more telling is this is what I think a cool character is in 1991.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like you said, the money that was spent on this movie is fairly obvious. Like they don't hide the fact that it wasn't a thing where, hey, we're just like gonna sort of spend this on the cast and let the cast do it. Like in the first 6 minutes, like when we go into the castle and we see like Da Vinci's lab, like the set piecing of that is massive. They had to build all that from scratch. It all moves together. So you put a lot of people to work in order to build this set and have it function the way it needs to on camera. And even the way that they did the camera rigging, where it comes sort of like from over the top of where it is and then back behind the scaffolding and then follows Da Vinci through the door into the next room. Like that definitely is not cheap. And if you were to tell, I guess, your producers that we're making a Bruce Willis action comedy and I need you to build a set for Leonardo da Vinci's lab, and then that's going to be the first 6 minutes of the movie. Like, you got to pull your punches and just, hey, we need money because we're building like a castle set piece, and it needs to be elaborate. So you just write the check and you'll see it when we get out on the back end.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like they scrimped on anything else though to make up for that. Like, I suppose there's one really kind of obvious early 90s special effect with the paraglider with Bruce Willis and Andy MacDowell, but for the most part, like most of that stuff is in camera, and it just looks. I suppose it looks tangible, even though there's parts where you're like, obviously Bruce Willis is stuntman, obviously Danny Aiello is not moving that fast, but at least you can still see that it's a real person doing it. Like, there's very even the guy at the start where they use what, and I've written down here, Chekhov's paraglider, because you see it at the start and then it makes a reappearance at the end. Like, you can see that guy is genuinely kind of flying that thing along. And I think that makes a huge difference. Watching the film, they really put the effort into trying to, like, instead of just like, I suppose you wouldn't have CGI'd it back then, but like a model or a miniature or something like that. It's like, we're actually going to build this paraglider and get it to move around,
Yeah, because, somebody's got to climb into that thing and hopefully, not crash. So there was before we get too far, we're going to go to the trailer soon here in a second, but you had mentioned the way like Danny Aiello is moving in this movie, and he's not moving too fast. And like, one of the funniest scenes to me was their first break-in back into the museum together, and he's riding the skateboard, and like the way he's sitting on it, he's just like putting the least amount of effort possible into this while Bruce Willis is on his knees. He's like taking it seriously. Aiello looks like he's out for like a casual like paddle boating experience, as if he's like in like a 2-man kayak where he's in the back not paddling at all.
Yeah, it's like he's sitting in it. They're on the skateboards, and they're kind of moving along slow, and Aiello was just like sitting down like yoga pose, and he's kind of pushing like with his 2 arms to try and move himself along. But one of the notes that I had made, and I always thought about this about the film, is that, like, obviously because Bruce Willis's name was supposed to go, he seemed to be really trying hard to make everything work, the comedy and how cool the character was and how cool the character looked, and Danny Aiello just breezes into this film, and he is so much more charismatic and likable and charming. And like, I don't mean that as a slight against Bruce Willis, but like, Danny Aiello is just so naturally good. And there's even parts I was watching it, like, with my wife was, as I say, was in the room, and I was like, Bruce Willis really fancied himself as a singer, and then Danny Aiello is over there like giving it socks, and he's doing really good, and Bruce Willis is kind of trying to, he's kind of singing in a hushed tone. So Danny Aiello is the other side of the room. He's like belting it out, he was such a treasure.
Yeah, and in that scene that I'm talking about, where they break in to the museum and that they're on the skateboards, to your point about how Aiello approached his character and this movie and sort of what the tone was versus Bruce Willis. Like, Bruce is coming from Die Hard, both Die Hard 1 and 2, and so he has like his action chops already lined up. So this is a scene where they're trying to sneak around and not get caught by the guards. So he's the one who's down on his knees. He's below the level of the window. He's looking around corners. He's being cautious. He's, like you said, trying to breathe some level of legitimacy into the character and into the story that they're telling. Danny Aiello is so casual that the top of his head is above the window line as they're going in the hallway. Yes. So I think that's why I was laughing so hard. I was like, you could clearly see his head over the window. So I love that, like you said, he just breezes into this movie, and he must have just read the script and been like, oh yeah, this is a joke, right? So I'm just going to have fun with it. While Bruce is the guy who's really like putting in all the legwork to make it serious. And I would say like Coburn a little bit too. Like, you need his character there to give it some gravity, because if there isn't a character that is sort of twisting the thumb screws on Hudson Hawk, then you kind of really will lose your way. So you needed a menacing villain with gravitas to really like hold down and anchor that side of the film.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Coburn works well as the antithesis, whatever that word is, to literally Grant and Sandra Bernhard. In that, even though he's not playing, like they're up to 11, but he's at maybe like an 8 or a 9. But again, like I have in my notes, I just have written down here. James Coburn is so goddamn good because, like Danny Aiello, he shows up and he's got this big James Coburn smile and his big James Coburn voice, and it's like you kind of sit up and pay attention when he's talking because he's just, like you say, he brings that much more, like you say, gravitas to the film. And I think he's a vital cog in the machine. Even though he has a very, very peculiar fight scene near the end, which reminded me again of like Naked Gun Rare Airplane. Like Bruce Willis he has this big stick and he's trying to hit James Coburn with it. James Coburn does these 3 spinning roundhouse kicks and he makes the stick shorter every time he kicks it. But then just as he's finished, he stops and he kind of, as if he's dizzy, and it's just so funny, and it's such a great choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the movie, so I mean, we're gonna get to that eventually. But since we're there right now, that fight scene, like you said, you got Coburn, his stunt double's in there throwing like spinning back kicks to the body. He's a very kick heavy fighting style, and then he sort of unceremoniously attempts a flying jump kick that just sends him over the wall of the castle to just like cap off what was already a ridiculous fight scene at that point. So like it was just such a weird like tone shift from, okay, like we know he's the bad guy. Oh, okay, he can actually fight and he's like capable of physically beating up Bruce Willis's character, and then to make just like a huge tactical error on the edge of the castle, just like really just brought it all back down to, I think, like the tone that it needs to be in that moment, because you can't have too serious of a fight scene there, or else it gets it's like it feels even more out of place there.
Yeah, but it's like you said, I think you buried the lead on that, because before he attempts to do that jump kick, he's kicking Bruce Willis like in the chest and in the back and in the chest and in the back, and then Bruce Willis just starts moving back and forward from the waist of his own volition, and it's like there's no rhyme or reason to it. Like I've heard it described before. It's like in Street Fighter when your opponent is stunned and they just kind of rock back and forth. And Coburn lines up to do the kick, and Bruce Willis bends over to pick up his hat, and Coburn just sails over the top. It's such an unceremonious end for that character. I don't know if you picked up on the name of his character by any chance.
I don't know. It's not ringing any bells like in the moment. Who was it?
The character's name is George Kaplan, which is the name of the spy whose Cary Grant was mistaken for in North by Northwest.
Oh.
So there's a bit of pointless trivia.
Hey, I mean, it's nice that they brought in some like cinema history, and that's not the only bit of it either. And I would say it's a testament to the filmmaking, even though like if this is not your cup of tea and it doesn't work for you, like the budget's there, the cast is there, the performances are there, the humor is there. And even if it doesn't necessarily like land and, it flopped and whatever, like this movie was made with intent and with care and with focus, and maybe the particular product that came out the other side of that like didn't sit well with people, but I don't think that detracts from the level of attention that went into making it. And I think that is a distinction, and in watching it I can clearly see a lot of those intentful choices, and it's like, okay, I see what you're going for here, and it's not like this aimless mess that's just, oh well, it's bad because it's unfocused, or the villain's plan wasn't a good plan, or whatever the little like nitpicky type stuff was. But I can't wait to read what these terrible reviews are when we get to the end.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we get to the trailer, it's time for a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of Bad Movies We Love is brought to you by Cool Hats for Cool Cats. Do you ever look at your cat, or any cat for that matter, and think they'd be so much more stylish in a hat? Well, I know I do. As a hat wearer myself, I know that when I have a nice hat, I feel nice, and I want all my feline friends to feel that same level of confidence. All types of hats are welcome, and there's no hat that Cool Hats for Cool Cats doesn't love because they're an unofficial 501c3 charity that relies on donations from kind folks just like you to donate your unwanted hats. Worried about cleanliness? Well, don't be. All their hats are steam cleaned to the highest standards before going through their state-of-the-art shrinking process. Once your furry friend picks out their preferred style, they'll be measured and fitted by a professional hatsmith to make sure they're looking their best and are completely comfortable with their selection. While you wait, you can enjoy treating your fuzzy family to a nice glass of catnip tea to help ease any anxiety around the selection process. Wouldn't your cat look fetching in a fedora, perfect in a pillbox, confident in a cowboy hat, or astonishing in an ascot? You already know the answer is yes, but feel free to browse their selection online or just head over to Cool Hats for Cool Cats in person and let one of their trained stylists treat you right. That's Cool Hats for Cool Cats. All right, are you ready to watch this trailer? Let's see.
This summer, Bruce Willis is back in business.
Thanks for saving me, tough guy.
Yeah, look, action movie.
Is booming.
Yeah, and you even have
I
the
was afraid you weren't going to drop by.
voiceover guy for the movies.
Yeah.
It's Bruce Willis.
Check, please.
The best cat burglar that ever lived.
I didn't want to do it. All I wanted was a cappuccino.
But he can't retire
Maybe nobody told you. I quit stealing.
if he wants to keep on living.
This is a brand new tuxedo!
Watch your step.
Hope we get to that tuxedo.
Hold your breath.
Yeah.
Hang on for dear life. And catch the Hawk.
Good plan,
There's a
Junior.
lot of
Bruce
explosions in
Willis,
this movie.
Danny Aiello,
Yeah.
Andy MacDowell, Hudson Hawk.
Sounds like a party.
It was a party. And
Yeah,
like
that would absolutely. So,
I'm sorry, go for it.
you're good. I was just going to say, like, if you saw that trailer in somewhere in 1990 or 91, the year before the film came out, that no way prepares you for the film that you watch after seeing that trailer.
Not
It's
at all.
not even close.
They kind of hint that like it's gonna have humor, right? They show you like the back end of a couple of jokes, so almost like John McClane's sense of humor, where the joke setup isn't there; it's just more his reaction to the situation that happens to be funny. And a scene that they showed in that trailer, or at least the back end of it, is they just kind of you see him like plop down at the table with Andy MacDowell, and there's like feathers flying, so you don't get any of the context of like why that's funny. I don't even understand why that's in the trailer, because the only thing you see is like him plopping and then some feathers shooting out. But that whole scene of him landing on the pigeon coop, or the chicken coop, breaking it open, having the chicken like standing on his back as they're driving around the stunt car as well. And then it just happens to go by the restaurant where he's on his way to meet her for dinner. He falls off the second story of the truck and right into the seat at the table, and then it's like a little like sleight of hand magic trick where he's got feathers in his hand and he gives it a little cough and shoots the feathers out. Like that whole scene doesn't like what we see in the trailer there just doesn't do that whole setup justice, because without any of the context it's just like a moment of like flash, right? So it's interesting to see that obviously you're going to cut the trailer to make it look as close to the most marketable film that you think it can be. And if you start showing some of like the craziest stuff in this movie, then you get away from it. But you had mentioned something earlier when we were talking, and you had mentioned sort of like some connective tissue to the tone of Ace Ventura, right? And I'm curious, if this is a Jim Carrey movie during that early 90s era, is it received differently than because it's Bruce Willis?
The expectation at the time was, this is Bruce Willis and he does action. And unless you knew him from Moonlighting, maybe, then you'd know what he does with the comedy. But I'm not sure if The Last Boy Scout had come out before or after this, but it was around that time. So like you're three kind of fairly prominent Bruce Willis action movies back to back. And if you're into movies at the time, you see Joel Silver's name attached as well. And Joel Silver would have been coming off the back of Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, two Die Hards, Last Boy Scout. Like he was a big name at the time as well. I don't think people were prepared for the type of comedy to come from Bruce Willis. Like you say, if it had been, Jim Carrey is a good example. I'm trying to think of who would have kind of predated Jim Carrey in that kind of slapstick comedy kind of way, but I kind of drawn a blank. But
yeah, at that time in the 90s, I don't know.
Seen as too, Bruce Willis would have been just too kind of, he makes jokes, but they're more quips. They're not like, slappingly hilarious or anything like that, which is kind of what he's trying to go for here. But yeah, it's. I think it could have maybe a few years later. Maybe maybe Bruce Willis had done like the whole 9 yards and then gone into this, they were like, oh yeah, Bruce Willis can do comedy. But I don't think people were fully prepared for the type of comedy and the tone of the comedy. Like, I don't think people were prepared for the tone of the film, because to me it felt like a PG-13 premise in a rated R movie is what I had written down. Because there's a couple of times where like there's like they're effing and jeffing left, right, and center, and like there's people getting their throats cut, their heads cut off, and I was like, that's a very jarring shift in tone to make. And I suppose, you would have expected that level in a Die Hard, but when you're watching a trailer like that, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit lighter. Maybe I can bring some kids to see it. And it's like, no, it's not that at all. I suppose if you could say, you would have parents who like Die Hard and say, oh, this is a Bruce Willis movie, it looks harmless enough, bring the kids to see it because they're too young to watch Die Hard, and then you get what you get then. And it's, try bringing up a couple of kids to see that film and sitting through Italian with no subtitles at the start.
Yeah, if you brought your kids to see that movie, you probably walked out in the first 6 minutes, to be fair, and then you lived the rest of your life thinking that this movie was terrible, but you never gave it a chance. But like you said, when the like evil butler gets introduced for the first time and whips out his retractable switchblade sword from his sleeve and cuts Hudson's parole officer's throat, like that's a very stark change in the film that we're watching at that point. And you do get the idea like, oh, this is serious. Like, we're not just messing around with, hey, we're gonna, rob a museum, or we're gonna kind of have this like, witty back and forth with these two characters. People can die in this, and die in a very graphic fashion, because one of the scenes that I really was super surprised by was when the auctioneer just explodes. He's in the middle of auctioning off this horse, and then he detonates.
Yeah.
And so there was obviously a bomb somewhere, but it looked like he's the one that explodes. And they did a lot of the practical effects work to get a double in there and cut it. So you see that happen. They use that a second time later in the movie. But even that is it happens, and it's so surprising. That's much less visceral than seeing somebody get their throat slit. And you can see that Bruce Willis's character is sort of reacting to this situation like, hey, I knew that this was like dangerous to a degree, but the way that they sort of dispatch the security guards with the rope, and then like the head bonk with the sound effect, and the thumb handcuffs, like that's all just like ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba, kind of this like a very cartoonish way to get out of that situation. Absolutely. Only to watch a guy get his throat slit right in front of you not too shortly after that. It's very very dark very quickly.
Yeah, and even the scene where they're going to do the heist, and Danny Aiello has like a life ring, they're going to crawl from one building across, and he throws it, and it lands on like a metal wire sticking out, and it makes this like bell ringing sound, like the carnival where you hit the thing with the hammer and it makes that bell, and it's like, why did that make that sound? And then, like you said, you have the moment of extreme violence, but just beforehand you have Bruce Willis and Danny Aiello jump off the roof through an awning, and then it smash cuts to Bruce Willis just sitting into a recliner. And I remember when I saw that the first time, like when I was a lot younger, I was like, Are they living in an apartment directly under that awning, or is what did I miss here?
I had to stop and think about that too. I was like, did he just break through the roof? Or I was like, oh, it was just like a snap cut where they used that mechanism to show him like appearing in this other room. I was like, such a
Yeah,
weird choice to make, and to edit it like that is so particular. Like, because you have to be watching that back thinking, hey, we filmed the whole thing of them crashing through the awning, and then okay, do we want to show them like get up and dusting themselves off and like getting away with it as the police cars come to the scene and they're already out of there? Like you've seen in a lot of other heist movies where the guys are getting away with it and the sort of the sirens in the background, and then go to the apartment. Or let's just cut all that out because all these other movies have already done this already, and let's try something and see how it turns out. But in the application of it, especially since this was the first time seeing it for me, I was like, wait a second, I thought that was like the awning in front of a hotel or something. Like, how did he end up in this? I'm like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there.
yeah,
So impressive.
yeah. It was like I appreciate stuff like that sometimes because, like you said, you don't want to see them, dust themselves off and run from the cops, and then cut to him walking into the room and sitting down in the chair. It's not as visually like it does. It's confusing when it happens, but it's more visually interesting than just him walking into the room and making a joke, sitting down, and then the rest of the scene playing out as normal. I did like there's a couple of little things that I noticed this time that I had spotted before. Like you said, when the auction room explodes, and there's all this chaos, and there's kind of slow motion, like debris flying around this, and I sat and I said, there's an arm flying through the air. So obviously there's a dummy exploded, and there's bits of it flying everywhere. And when Bruce Willis is explaining to Danny that, we robbed the horse statue and he gave it to the butler, and the butler smashed him over the parole officer's head. I think his exact words were something like, oh, the butler took Mr. Ed and smashed it over, smashed it open. And then later on, the Pope is watching Mr. Ed on TV in the Vatican. And I was like, that's such a, like, it's because it's clever. And then it's like, who's that for exactly? Like, it's probably for somebody just to kind of say, that was my joke. I put that there and nobody noticed. So it's kind of as strange as it sounds for a film that is so peculiar in places. It kind of rewards your attention in little moments like that. Because you'd miss those two things if you weren't looking for things like that.
Yeah, and I will say that it almost is a little too clever for its own good, because at the end of the day, like, you need to sell this movie to a wide audience to be successful. You spent $65 million on this movie, and so when it only brings in like what 15 20 million back, it's like, okay, this is a financial failure, but why was that? And like you said, who was the movie really made for? And if you look at it like it's made for like Bruce Willis having his creative input on this, and
Yeah.
it's made for the people that are in the movie to have fun with it. Because like Richard E. Grant's obviously having a great time in this. Like David Carradine's character, or excuse me, not David Carradine, David Caruso, his Kit Kat character is just like
David Caruso,
completely,
yeah.
and it's so quiet too. Like the decision to just have this guy not talk. Like literally, he doesn't speak. He communicates through a collection of business cards that he has like pre-printed with messages on them, and he just shows up all of a sudden in the background, and he's dressed like Bruce Willis, or he's dressed like Andy McDowell, or he's dressed like a statue. And see, like, there's no explanation for why his character is doing this, because I think the first time we meet him, he's just wearing like a eccentric, colorful suit, but he's not dressed like an ambulance, So as the movie goes on and he progressively begins to take on these things in his surroundings as like sort of a chameleon, and not explaining that, not giving his character the ability to even explain it, is such a bold decision that's going to be very, very off-putting for a lot of people. But to your point about rewarding your attention, I think this is a movie that will likely be better watching it multiple times. So for the people that really do like it and want to give it their attention and have fun with it, and kind of like just put it on and get back into it again, there's probably more stuff to take away from it each time you watch it. And that's generally the case with films. Like, you come back to something 5 years later, you've sort of changed personally, and so maybe the way you interact with a film is different than it was when you saw something as a kid, or vice versa, depending on how big the gap is between viewings. But this is a movie that, like, the story is straightforward. It's an art thief who is blackmailed into doing something that he doesn't want to do, and he has to find a way out of it. Like, very simple. But all of the supporting structure around it is very intricate and very colorful. And even if I were to say, like, pause on this for 5 years and come back to it, I don't think my interpretation of the story or the themes would change drastically, but the fine details of the little supporting stuff. Like, if you were to go to, say, like, or like old woodworking on, like, a desk from, the golden age of craftsmanship. Like, you see the nice desk and it's like, okay, it's a nice functional desk, right? But then it's like, oh, there's like a switch here that opens a drawer, and there's this another switch underneath that drawer that opens another secret compartment. And just like the little fine detail of all that really adds up. And the more you sit there and the more you sort of investigate what this thing is, the more it opens itself up. And I'm, like I said earlier, like, I'm so glad that this was my first time watching it, because as a kid, I would probably just be like, oh, this was a Bruce Willis, like, action vehicle that I didn't really fully understand. And so seeing this as an adult and, like, getting to kind of hone in on some of the stuff that's happening in the background really made it a much, much more enjoyable experience than I was anticipating.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, there's so many little things that I found myself going this time going, well, I never noticed how just weird that was before. Like, there's the part where he's going to suss out the Da Vinci sketchbook, and there's this little girl, and she has this big teddy bear, and she's just hitting it off the steps, and he's just looking at her, and she sticks out her tongue and walks by. And it's just this weird scene. But then her mother comes in the shop, and she says, it's really subtle, and you can just about hear her. She goes, "Stop it! You're embarrassing your country," and she drags the child off. It's such a specifically worded joke. Or even like the security guards in the Vatican, and they're like, one of them takes out a flask and he just starts pouring spaghetti out of his flask onto a plate. And like, it's such a, it's such like it's a real airplane or a hot shots joke, but it's like, yeah, it kind of fits here.
Yeah, I had to rewind that actually, because I'm like, did this guy, like, just the security guard at the museum just has hot spaghetti in a thermos? It's like, because the joke is like, this guy is so Italian that he keeps spaghetti in his thermos, right? And so to, like, see it play out, I'm like, again, this is just such a weird joke to be in a movie that wants to, like, sometimes be taken seriously, but most of the time it's having fun. And it is such, like you said, like an airplane joke, or like that tone of humor. And I rewound it. I'm like, nope, that was indeed spaghetti in a thermos. It's like, we've seen security guards in so many other movies with a thermos, and they pour themselves a cup of coffee, and then a motorcycle rides by really fast and they spill it on themselves, or, something explodes and the coffee goes flying. So to take a joke, or not even a joke, but to take a scene that has been in a lot of other films and to inject this way different kind of personality into it. And, like, it's not really making fun of Italians, but it's just having fun with the idea that, like, hey, we're in Italy, like, what would the security guard have in his thermos? Because it would probably be coffee or tea or whatever. And it's like, no, this guy's got spaghetti in here, and they're just on their lunch break. It's a great joke. I'm glad that you brought it up, because I wrote it down for myself as well. And I think that's kind of the area that I started to really dial into, like, what this movie wants to do and how they're going to go about doing it.
Like, probably like, can't fit a pizza into it. Spaghetti will do.
Mm-hmm. If a slice of pizza came out of that thing, that would be hilarious, though. It would be.
Oh my God, I would love this.
You would have so much trouble, like, getting the pizza to fall out practically, though. So I wouldn't be surprised, though, if they tried it and they couldn't make it happen. And so they're like, okay, we're going to just go with spaghetti because we know it will come out and work on camera. I would love to talk to Bruce Willis and the other writers and Michael Lehmann who directed it and be like, how did you arrive and settle on this particular joke?
It's just like the film doesn't always work, but it's never boring because there's always something just weird about to happen. So you think that she's a prayer to this cross, and then this voice comes in and talks back to her. It's just such a weird thing. Like, and Bruce Willis even says it. He goes like, "That's weird." It's so good. But again, that goes back to another like production design element. It's like somebody had to go and make that cross that lit up, and presumably there was somebody underneath it pressing the button in time with the lines of dialogue.
Yeah, it's such a weird way to communicate that particular thing, but you're getting into this sort of like you're getting in like the underground of the Vatican, and you're getting into like a little bit of history of the area as well too, but like very light history. So for like the idea that this like whole underground tunnel system exists in the first place, and then they just transport like mail to him constantly like he's Santa Claus. And I think she even says like, oh, he takes his mail very seriously. And you get to the point where, yeah, they kind of like Bruce Willis like leaves the screen and there's just like this cross and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. But the one thing that happens is something that you never assume would happen. And it starts lighting up and talking to her. And so it's just, again, another one of those things that is such a distinct choice to try to make for this character, and to have it be like she's almost like a Charlie's Angels kind of, where like, you know, who's it? Bosley's the one that you see, but the guy on the other side of the radio that you don't see, Charlie, right?
Yes,
so that kind of same like intercom system where it's like she's just an agent of this other person. And we do eventually see him, so it's not as like weird and disembodied, but very, very strange.
You see them in the confessional where she steps out and she's wearing her nun gear, and he basically like he's like her M to James Bond basically, and he's like going in, and she puts on a pair of shades and just walks out like the coolest nun in the world.
I love that she had fun with it too, because you know conventionally she's there as the love interest, but 99 times out of 100 the love interest like falls for the kind of like cliched actions of the hero, and that's sort of like what's going on but also not what's going on at the same time. And her relationship to the church and her being a nun is like secretly standing in the way of how she feels, and Bruce isn't exactly 100% on board with what's happening. And so it even takes like a simple dynamic, something that would be familiar for the audience, and even takes that and twists it up so that it's not going to be something that you immediately recognize. But I'm glad you mentioned James Bond, because as I was watching this, I felt like Austin Powers was heavily influenced by this movie. The tone of the humor, some of the jokes directly, I think, were also done that way. And I mean, I think our first meeting with the Mayflowers is the name of, Sandra Bernhard and Richard E. Grant, the Mayflowers. The first meeting, when you walk in there, they have their little table set up, and you've got all these people from across the world. And I mean, some of them are, very culturally inappropriate, but at the same time, it's like, here's this guy, here's this guy, here's this guy. So it's very much Austin Powers, and it's like this big meeting room. It's the opposite, where they've got like these big floor to ceiling windows, but it's all kind of like stone as well. Even Sandra Bernhardt's character, who's like sort of very loud and obnoxious and forward, is very much sort of an influence for that same character dynamic in Austin Powers as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like the big elaborate, and if I'm not mistaken, one of the characters at the round table was like this child, like he's a little child wearing turban, and just the kind of over the top nature of the way Richard E. Grant speaks about what they're going to do. And it's like, what he said, pride, ambition, they're going to be trinkets on my mantelpiece and all this kind of stuff. And they're talking about flooding the world's market with gold and all this kind of, and it's very much like, yeah, definitely Austin Powers lifted a lot from it. Like the whole supervillain vibe from Richard Grant was just through the roof. It's as if, yeah, he just said, he looked at the biggest James Bond villain and said, I'm going to do that, but multiply it by 10.
Yeah, more style, more color, more fun.
Yeah. Sandra Bernhardt, initially when I remember seeing it back in the day, and I wasn't a fan of her character, but now I kind of get it, if that makes sense. Like, she's supposed to be abrasive and loud and just really obnoxious American, no offense to you or your fellow countrymen. But that's, you know, I suppose it's meant to be, maybe it's a comment, maybe it's supposed to be a commentary on, like, you know, the lack of appreciation for fine art or something like that. But, like, they're going buying the statue as if it's just, like, not worth anything to the world. Because I think he offers, like, $100 million, and then she walks in, and again, very Dr. Evil, actually, when you think about it. And she comes in, she goes, 100 million and one. And, you know, they don't place any value on anything. Again, but like you say, in a normal film, you'd be like, oh, that's such a cliche. But in this one, it's like, they really embrace that cliche. And it's like, yeah, we know. That's why we're going so big with it.
Yeah, it's like performative opulence on their part. And in that scene that you're talking about, they're bidding around, I think, like 20, 25 million. And then he just comes in like arms in the air. He's not even in the auction room. He walks in from outside and just goes 100 million and like just proclaims a big number that's 80 million. It's 5 times as much as anybody's bidding at the time. So he knows nobody's going to compete with him. And then his wife, I don't know if she's his wife, but they're both Mayflower. Yeah. So I assume, okay, she comes in and then again, just $100 million and one. So like to come and kind of upstage him, but really like they're together, so it really isn't her bidding it like she's gonna get it and he's not. And you're talking about $100 million, so the $1 doesn't make a difference, but he still kind of bows down and is like, oh well, I guess that's too rich for me, kind of thing. So it's all this performative wealth for them. And like you said, it's obnoxious in the way that they just don't value anything. Like they're these huge caricatures of colorful, rich supervillains, and like their superpower is being obnoxious. But they're both very good at that. And sort of the way that she sort of first engages with Bruce Willis when he's handcuffed, that moment is just, she dives like right into it, and it is very much like gross in a way, I guess. Like I don't know if I have a better word for that, but she is just kind of a gross character. And I love that she's not afraid to embrace that part of it. Like she wants to be that. And I think it's later in that same scene where they're basically trying to strong arm into doing this particular robbery, and he doesn't want to, he just wants to go home, you know, etc. And he says something like, like, just throw me in jail at this point. I don't even care. And she's like, jail? And like, she just like, we're going to have our guys come and just blow your fucking brains out. Like the way that she goes through the mechanics of that particular scene, it's like threatening, but it's also not threatening at the same time. It just comes across so weird. And again, just performative. And I think she did a really wonderful job with it. And so did Grant.
I was just going to say he has this great monologue where, again, I think it's the same scene where it's affecting him, and he has this great line where he goes, I'm going to torture you so badly you're going to think it's a career. And it's like, I kind of don't believe it when he says it. And then you're kind of like, well, you don't know what lurks just beneath the surface of this character, because we've only ever seen him like be really big and arrogant and abrasive. And like you say, when he bursts into the auction room, he's like hands up in the air as if he's after scoring a goal in the World Cup final. Like, you know, it's like a big showy kind of look at me kind of a thing. But yeah, no, he's terrific in this.
He is, and I love that line because you have to think about that joke a little bit. He's not like I'm just gonna I'm gonna peel your skin off, or like it's vague in a way that makes you actually think of what that joke encompasses, but the movie is moving too fast to give that joke room to breathe. So that's one of those things where if you're watching it a second time, or if like you're just like you can take that and sort of like you have to pause with it because like the dialogue is still unfolding in the room, but to think of like what does he mean by he's going to make you think it's a career, like is he going to be in there with you just torturing you for the next 30 years? So it's smart, but I like that the movie doesn't really give you too much time to dwell on it, because a conventional villain is, they're going to give you kind of the conventional threats of like, I'm going to beat you so bad that, you're going to wish that you were never born, or, I'm going to do this or that. Like, I'm going to go after your family, like that kind of stuff. But either this character doesn't really like torture people and doesn't know what to say in that moment, or he really does torture people to that extent where he just does it every day for 30 years and really enjoys the hell out of it. And it's layered in a way that is complex, but also not too much. Like it was a very smart joke that I liked in that scene. And I love that the movie just is like, hey, don't pay too much attention to it. It's smart, but we're going to keep going. So like catch up to us.
Yeah, it's one that you think about a few hours later and go, oh, what's that about? It's like there's a line in the sound that it kicked around in my head for years after I'd seen it, but I had forgotten where I had heard it until I watched the film about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was like, that's where that's from. And it was when Danny Aiello was saying, I didn't smoke. I didn't smoke to the song, my first no smoking song. And then he stops and goes, keep off the grass, let's play soccer. That line is just so good.
Yeah, and he even delivers that line with a kind of like quiet confidence where it's like it's not that the joke isn't funny, but it's not funny in the same way that some of the other jokes are. So it is this like, middle finger to authority, and like you're not going to tell me what to do. And sort of the knee jerk reaction to, if there's a sign that says like don't cross this line, I'm going to cross that line. And that's like his personality type. And I love that he looked at that and just embodied it with so much confidence, because it is structured differently than a lot of the other humor in the film. And his character may be the only one that could really pull that off, because like you said earlier, like he comes in and he's so like confident and just so breezy with the performance. Like of all the people that you could believe were their actual character, he's probably the best at it. How you feel about doing some trivia?
Oh, keep me all of it.
Time for trivia.
When you get done trivia with the last couple of episodes you've done, and I was on IMDb, I was like, no, not going to get trivia. I'm not going to spoil it for myself. There's a lot of trivia.
There is. And you've done a little bit. So it's like I tried to format the questions a little bit in a way where I'm like, okay, like maybe this will work, maybe not. We'll see how it goes. I'm still fine tuning the trivia stuff, but let's go. So number one, I had sort of mentioned Austin Powers, right? And that's a movie that's set with its 60s presence as well, and those influences. The tone, the audio tone that's on Hudson Hawk's handcuffs when the Mayflowers handcuff him in the meeting room, that I believe is the ringtone of the phone in Austin Powers' car when Basil calls him, the FaceTime call. But
Oh my God.
that audio tone was it was taken from two other films in the 60s. Do you know what? You can name one of the two films, but either one of those.
Oh man, I don't know. It's like it's hardly in like 2001 Space Odyssey. No, not 2001. No.
No, the tone comes from the films Our Man Flint and In Like Flint, and it's used as the telephone ringtone. So yeah, I like as soon as I heard it, I was like, I know this from somewhere. And interestingly, in the trivia, it has these two movies listed. So now I feel like I need to go watch Austin Powers to kind of give it like a full circle experience and see if I was just imagining that or if it really is the FaceTime phone call sound. But I'm more confident that it is now than I was before, at least.
Yeah, I was just going to say something like that, I think, but if it's another bit of trivia, I don't want to step in the way.
We'll see. Okay, so question number 2. You had kind of talked about this earlier, so I'm pretty confident you're going to get this one. I said this, as you said, was written by Stephen E. D'Souza, who also wrote the screenplay for The Running Man, which we did an episode on just not too long ago. And it was the only writing credit for Bruce Willis, but it was the only writing credit for who else?
What's the guy that Bruce Willis wrote thing with Robert Kraft? I believe his name was?
Kraft, yes. I don't believe that's the same guy that owns the New England Patriots, but it is indeed Robert Kraft who got the other story credit for this film. And question number 3, Richard E. Grant turned down a role in which movie to play this character?
Oh, I don't know, but a really obvious answer would be probably the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. But
ding, correct. Well done.
Oh, wow.
It was indeed Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And like, okay, so Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, like movie wise, like certainly was more well received than this, but there's no way Richard E. Grant's going to have the same kind of fun in that movie that he got to have in this one. So I'm ultimately glad that he made this decision. I would love to hear his thoughts though on making that decision at the time, because you've seen like a lot more of these kind of like actors on actors conversations and sort of like what has been turned down and things like that over time. And I was watching sort of I think it was a Colbert interview with Keanu Reeves where he was talking about Colbert asked him if there was a character that he's played that he would like to reprise the role, and Keanu said yes, and Colbert was surprised that that wasn't enough to get the movie made, but he was talking about playing Constantine again. And I think I heard that they're actually working on that again now that John Wick has been so successful. So I'm happy to hear that because I love Constantine and I would have liked to see a sequel 15 years ago, whenever it came out. I don't remember.
Yeah, but it's just when you say that Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I think like Rickman's performance isn't a million miles away from Richard E. Grant's either. I think it's a little bit more grounded, but he still is prone to those like fits of like overacting and I'm gonna tear his heart out with a spoon and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like there's the share a little bit of DNA, I think.
I like that. I mean, that makes sense why Grant was considered for the role in the first place. I mean, we're gonna get into the Metascore stuff later, and we'll read those critics' reviews, but we're not quite going there yet because there's some other stuff that I wanted to talk about first. And one of those, we talked about some of these sort of supporting characters that are in the film that are part of like the equivalent of like the Suicide Squad. And so one of these guys is named Butterfinger, and he kind of played like this meathead sort of character in a lot of movies. He was Zangief in Street Fighter. He was the dude who was juicing to the gills in The Program back in 93. So he was always sort of like a muscle-headed character, but also almost always partially in a comedic role as well. So interesting to see him like kind of fully in a comedic role. And even though he's the muscle here, he never like is successfully the muscle, really. I think he picks up Bruce Willis and sits him down on the gurney the one time. But other than that, like he's never actually good at being the enforcer for this group.
No, he's absolutely useless. And even when they introduce him and he's stepping out of like a portable toilet, and one of them goes, this is Butterfingers, and Bruce Willis goes, yeah, no shit, because he's just so clumsy. He goes through most of the film without one of his teeth, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Bruce Willis kicked the shit out of him in Rome and just burst his head off a telephone box at one stage. And then he said something to him. He goes to hand him something. And then Bruce Willis does a boo-hoo from Yogi Bear impression back at him, which I think is very strange. But he there's a couple of great lines that happen kind of as a result of him and by him. There's the part with where they're stalking, staking out Bruce Willis. And they like give him his book, preacher book, and he starts reading it out loud. And then one just goes, "Do yourself," And it's just such, like I said, it's a little thing. And then there's a great line near the end where himself and Coburn are kind of going around with stuff exploding, and Coburn is like going, "Maybe we'll go this way," and then an explosion. He goes, "No, maybe we'll go this way." And he goes to walk through a door, and Coburn says, "Butterfingers, you go ahead there and do something." I can't remember what he tells him to do. And Butterfingers goes, "Yeah, put me in, coach." Like, what? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's like
it's so good.
A flashback to one of his other roles or something.
Yeah, it's so good. But I don't know, when you were reading off his roles, he was actually in the tiniest part in Batman Returns. He plays Christopher Walken's son.
Yes.
And I think he has like one line of dialogue in the whole film, and he does like a pitch perfect Christopher Walken impression. Because I think all he has to do is say something like, "No, Dad," and then that's all he says in it. And I believe his name was Chet in Batman Returns. So when I saw him this, I was like, "Oh, it's Chet," but like a tiny but memorable part. But yeah, like I enjoyed that kind of rogues gallery. But him and kind of Crusoe were the two standouts. I was watching this film going, David Crusoe did like CSI Miami for so many years, but he could also do this if he had chosen to do this. So I think we missed out on some prime David Crusoe.
I think so too. And it's like, look, not to belittle CSI Miami or whatever that show was that he's doing, like that's steady work. That show's been on TV for a long time, and he's kind of, found his way into being that character. But to get a role like this where he doesn't talk and it's all just like his physical acting, and like you said, I think we missed out on his ability to be a good comedic actor. And I mean, my favorite scene with him in the movie is where all of a sudden he's just in costume as Hudson Hawk, standing behind Bruce Willis. Don't know where he came from, but he's dressed just like him, and he's sort of trying to mimic all the things that Bruce Willis is doing with his physical body language and his mannerisms. And I don't have any idea why. I think that's the first time in the movie where we see that happen. And it just all of a sudden he's behind him, and I don't think we saw him anywhere else around in that scene, even though all of the other of the members of that Rose Gallery are kind of there.
The kind of scene cuts, it's like a back and forth with James Coburn and Bruce Willis, and the camera is on James Coburn while he's talking, and then it cuts back and you see him stepping out of the phone booth that Bruce Willis was in, like 2 minutes later. It's like, how did he come along and go into the phone booth and then come out again? But even like his hair is dyed for that scene. He dyed his hair black for that scene just so he'd look. And he has a little trickle of blood coming out the side of his mouth where Hudson Hawk got punched a few seconds before. He's really like committing to this part, and then he's dressed up like you said as Andy MacDowell later in the movie. It's like, what is this even supposed to be? Like it's, there was a part of me that was kind of thinking, is there going to be a fake out later in the movie where you think? Do you remember when you think Danny Aiello's character is gone as another turn? Oh no, that was Kit Kat. They swap bodies and he put on a fat suit and stuff like that. It's like, no, he just kind of gets shot with a crossbow, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And then he gives that down the little card and it says, "I always liked you." And I was like, that's so bizarre. Like, in all the cards for. And I was thinking about this earlier, just while we're kind of talking about what happens in the movie. But me and you talking about what happens in the movie doesn't actually do it justice for what you see on screen or when you hear the lines being delivered, because us describing it is absolutely not a fair reflection of how things are delivered and things are shown on screen. There's more to it than just what we're talking about, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the movie is so strange that, like, even though you and I have seen it, so we're enjoying looking back on those scenes. But for someone who hasn't seen it, sort of to what I pointed to earlier, where it's like, that this is the story that you've seen before. Like, guy gets out of prison, gets blackmailed into doing this thing, needs to find a way out of it. Like, the story beats are all there. So it's not really like any spoiling to it. It's Bruce Willis at the height of his fame after Die Hard. Like, he's the hero. We know what those stories are like. So it is a lot of the connective tissue that really makes this movie stand out. And I'm going to champion for this very hard going forward, because I think people should see this, and I think its reputation at this point is definitely undeserved as being a bad movie. I understand it
No.
being in the realm of a movie that flopped, but this is a movie that I think was just ahead of its time. Like, this style of humor where it's sort of overly aware of its own existence, what they call meta these days. It's much more at
Yeah.
home stylistically now than it would have been in 1992. So I think there's probably a good audience for this now, although I don't know who's actually seen it and who's not, but I know Ben, who's in the film club. I think he said he loves this movie as well. So glad to see that somebody else out there has at least given us a stamp of approval before we moved forward with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the other thing, if this film had came out after Death Becomes, I think Bruce Willis's performance would have been a bit more palatable. Because he plays, that's a weird comedy, but he's not the main character in that film, so that kind of, he doesn't have the pressure of performing as the main character in it, if that makes sense. And again, it's strange, if I go back to your trivia section, Isabella Rossellini was meant to play Andy MacDowell's character, but she had to drop out because of scheduling issues. And when you were talking about Armand Flint, of course, there's the James Coburn connection, because James Coburn is in Armand Flint. And I just have one more note here about Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft and Bruce Willis came up with the character through a song they had written, like I had said, kind of way back at the start. And Robert Kraft, I believe, got a co-writing credit for the music as well. And I don't know if you spotted, like, it's pretty obvious to me as somebody who watched Die Hard and Lethal Weapon a lot, which music belonged to Michael Kamen in this movie, which movie music belonged to Robert Kraft. Because that Michael Kamen, like, that's his kind of thing. And then there's this kind of jazzy, bluesy score that comes along, and I'm like, yeah, I can tell who did which sections of music. I don't think this was a collaborative effort. It was like,
yeah, as I sort of sat with that score, and I'm like, okay, so it's like got like a little detective noir kind of vibe going on. It's sort of embodying like the 40s and 50s sort of bluesy jazz, and I really like that music too. And it was one of the things that surprised me, I think, most early on, was that, hey, I'd love this jazzy score. And it's like right as he's, I think, getting released from prison too, is when that music first kicks in. So it is like his character introduction, and we're getting it against the backdrop of this very, bland setting that's very confined. So it's a weird juxtaposition of tones, but it is letting you know that this guy who's getting out of jail, like, his energy is here, and the world that he operates in, the energy's down here. So I like that those two things sort of clash with each other as well. Um, and when you're talking about Death Becomes Her, that was in, whoa, what year was that? That was 92. So same year. Well, at least it was made in 92. So it probably came out the year after that. But, you go on from this, and then he has like a short segment in Four Rooms, which is like a very dark comedy. But he also sort of does The Fifth Element. And although he's the action lead and the star of that film, that's also like he's doing a lot of comedic work in that film too. And, sadly, very sadly for me, Fifth Element is a movie that probably qualifies for this show because it's got a great user ratings because, of course, people love it because it's good. But critics did not like it at all. And I think with Death Becomes Her, it's similar. Like, it's well reviewed by people, but critic scores were very, very poor for it. And, Death Becomes Her is a lot darker tonally, but Bruce Willis is sort of like scatterbrained character as this doctor, but also beholden to these two women that he has made immortal with this serum. And him grappling with that gives him a very different style of humor to work with, like,
Yeah.
because as we said with Hudson Hawk, the humor is not too far removed from sort of what we see with John McClane. Like, he's still in the same sort of realm, but if John McClane operated in a world that was more PG and more just, flippant about what's happening, rather than he's constantly having to fight terrorists and, walk on broken glass. So I see that Death Becomes Her. It's like even he looks differently. They gave him the mustache and they kind of like turned him into this different person. But I think you're right that if Death Becomes Her and Fifth Element had come out before Hudson Hawk, I think would have been successful because now you're seeing that he's taking on these types of other roles, and especially with Fifth Element, with him being able to have comedy and to give some of that comedy to this film overall and still have it be a successful action film that is very colorful, that has very eccentric characters. I think there's a lot of connective tissue between those two.
Yeah, I think Hudson Hawk is due for a reevaluation. And I'm not a big fan of reevaluations, especially when newer films come out. It's as weird as it sounds. You kind of wonder, did the kicking that he got for Hudson Hawk and one where the vanities made him kind of right, I'll take smaller roles, made him more comfortable to take stuff like A Sixth Sense later in his career. Maybe that's overanalyzing it, but it's kind of a lot of ifs and buts.
No, I think it's important, and like you said, in terms of reevaluating this movie, it's been 30 years, so this isn't something where it's like, oh, this movie came out 5 years ago and was ill received, and like we really need to rally behind this movie. But in watching it and considering sort of, the decline in his health and maybe looking at his career with more intent and sort of, lamenting the loss of him as one of these iconic stars from the late 80s and 90s. And you see that I think also in the 90s there was sort of maybe like a little bit of a pushback against the tone of films that were successful during the 80s, because there's a point where 1986, the number one movie at the box office is I think Top Gun was 87, 86 was Beverly Hills Cop, or vice versa. Beverly Hills Cop 2, I think. So you've got like an Axel Foley having fun. But I think even with something like Beverly Hills Cop, the overall tone of the film is slightly more serious than Hudson Hawk. It's like it's a vehicle for Eddie Murphy to be funny, but it's not necessarily a vehicle for everybody in the movie to be funny, and that's a clear distinction.
Absolutely, yeah. If Bruce Willis if Bruce Willis was the only zany one and everyone else was playing straight, or if Bruce Willis was the straight man and everyone else was playing it zany, then easier in people's perceptions of what this kind of film is. But like even like Frank Stallone has a small part in it.
Mm-hmm.
That the other Mario brother, the brother goes, yeah, even I could understand that. The man goes, shut up, So it's like everybody is zany in this film. Like there's no normal person, and it's like you say, it's one of those ones that you think about after the fact. It's like, what does that even mean? And what's the backstory to that line? You know what I mean? The Pope warned me never to trust the CIA.
Yeah, very, very specific. And I like that. It gives the movie character, and there's some other lines like that as well. And I think in that same scene where Aiello is talking with the Mario brothers and I mean, that's leaving aside the whole like weird Nintendo thing that's going on in this movie with like
Yeah,
he's been in jail, he doesn't know what Nintendo is, but then they joke about, okay, let's play Nintendo together, like at the end of the movie, and then these two Italians who are like the third, what they say, the third biggest crime family in the city, they're the
yeah,
Mario brothers. So there's like very clearly intentioned references to Nintendo and I guess the influence maybe that it had on, you know, the creatives here, or maybe it was something that they were playing a lot of while they were on set, like,
yeah.
you know, waiting for things to get set up with these big set pieces. So I'd be curious to hear some of the backstory there. But in that same restaurant scene where he bonks the dumb Mario brother over the head with the champagne bottle, like I
That's
think it's Hudson that says to him, like, I think it's weird. He says, like, normally I would say kiss my ass, but for you, I'll say slurp my butt. And that again, that's such a weird intention in that, like, because you could just be like, okay, kiss my ass or, you know, whatever. But like the fact that he structures the whole thing out like this is because I'm going to say this, it warrants an explanation. And this is where the joke is going to land was very, very strange, but it also kind of like tones it down a little bit where it's like kiss my ass is maybe one of those things where it's like if you say ass too much in a movie, like your MPAA rating is climbing towards going towards an R. But if you say something that like slurp my butt, which is much more graphic when you think about it, it'll land in a realm where it's like you could put this in a PG movie, but you know, he's also just got out of jail too. So like when I'm thinking about it too much, I'm just like, I don't really know that I want to know
no, yeah,
where that saying came from.
yeah. Is that something that he heard in prison? Or, yeah, I think it's the word slurp. It's real, like it's a real mouthful of word. But yeah, like, and even like you said that the PG-13 thing, there's parts in this. I don't know if you've spotted it, where like it's clearly ADR'd out bad language. Like there's part at the start where the parole officer's trying to get him to do another job, and he grabs the keys. You know, you see the man's pocket that has the keys, and he clearly says something like, you know, go fuck yourself or something like that. But then the dialogue's like, do it yourself. And it's like, but the film is rated R anyway, so why are you covering over the swear words? Like, because in 15 minutes' time, some guy's going to have his throat slashed. You know? So
Yeah.
it's impossible to know what kind of went wrong. Not went wrong, sorry, because there's nothing wrong with this one. It's impossible to know what led to certain decisions being made.
Yeah, and you know, my best guess would be that like you watch it back and with a guy like Hudson saying go fuck yourself, maybe it doesn't fit his character quite as much as him being like, "Hey, I got the better of you, but I'm also not the kind of person to be like aggressively cursing at you in that moment." So, it sort of just like tones down his character a little bit to where he's not really like I don't think he says things like that too much throughout the rest of the movie either. He'll
He
swear
he
and he
just,
doesn't like hold back with that, but he's not directing it at other people very often, which sort of, you know, sets him apart from maybe like a darker character or a more adult character that we see in Die Hard. But like you said, it's rated R, so I mean, you might as well go for it because there's the scene where he's hanging out the back of the ambulance and like after the cigarette, or maybe before, he's like, "Oh, how's my driving? 1-800 I'm gonna fucking die." So it's like he's not unwilling to use that word. And I think in that moment, it's like he's almost passively using the F word as just the amplifier for what he's saying. Whereas in that other moment, it seems like maybe more mean spirited to tell this guy, like, go fuck yourself. So that's my best guess.
yeah. The only other thing I could think was like he doesn't want to give this guy an excuse to say that he used bad language at this parole officer back in jail or that kind of way. So maybe it's something like that. But again, I think there's a part of me that thinks we're going more in depth into this than what the people that actually made the film may have at some stages.
Oh yeah, quite possibly. But I think that those filmmakers would be glad that we're doing it because I think they put a lot of work into this movie that kind of just got overlooked and a case of hey, this got, you know, bombed by critics and it really like I think because of the cost of the budget. Like if this movie doesn't cost $65 million, it's not going to get dunked on in the way that it did. The fact that it was like positioned to be a successful action vehicle and maybe even spawn sequels down the road, I think is really the biggest handicap in terms of its expectations. Because if you go in thinking, hey, even more fun version of Die Hard, right? That's not what you walk out of this movie with. So, and then there's critics that like to dunk on it for other reasons, and we're about to get to that. But the one other line of dialogue that I wanted to talk about from Butterfinger before we get into it is they're in the stakeout, they're in the car, and he's like way too big for the backseat of the small Italian car. And so like visually, you already know like this is just not meant to be, but I love the decision to do that. And I forgot what it was, what the context was, but he says, "Do you want me to rape him?" And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Hold on. Did I just hear that correctly?" And of course I did because I had the subtitles on, but I was very struck by that line because I don't know how his character arrives at that, even within the context of what they've created for us. Like, he's not the muscle, so is he just like the group rapist?
He just blurts it out, and that's what I think that's the scene where they say to him, read your book to yourself.
Yes.
But yeah, that's it is again. I know we've used the word choice a lot when we're talking this because like that was quite a huge choice. And I just like I know the tone of the film is all over the place, but that's one thing where it's like, no, even that, like, no matter how wild the tone of the film is overall, that's just apropos of nothing.
Yeah, it's almost like they were like, "Hey, just ad lib this scene," and then they filmed it like 30 times with 30 different ways, and they're like, "All the other ones suck, so we got to use this one." And it's the one bit of dialogue that feels like it's not really at home in the rest of the movie because it's so
Yeah.
weird and intense. It's like, I mean, yeah, like rape jokes are not really easy to wield at any point. So to do it flippantly, especially, and like just casually, like, "Oh, do you want me to go up there and rape him?" Like, that's such a weird decision. And like, I don't think that's the one thing that turned everybody off, but it is definitely out of place with the rest of the film. Uh,
Hmm.
but we've arrived at that point where we go to Critics Corner, and now we really get to hear all of the horrible, horrible things that were said about this movie. And with a Metascore of 17, there's a lot of horrible things. So we always start at the bottom. And we got 2 zeros to start us off. So we get Entertainment Weekly or LA Times. And I'll let you choose which, pick your poison.
The Entertainment Weekly.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's a trade magazine, right? Okay, so Entertainment Weekly, this is Owen Gleiberman, says this may be the only would-be blockbuster that's a sprawling, dissociated mess on purpose. It's a perverse landmark, the first postmodern Hollywood disaster. It's interesting because he points to a lot of the things that actually I think we like about this, and still almost criticizes it for being like when he says Hollywood disaster, like to me that specifically resonates with its financial failure because otherwise like you don't bring that into it. You could just call it a disaster, but the fact that he says it's a would-be blockbuster and then calls it a disaster is again like critical of it not making money, not critical of it as a piece of, film.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But then you kind of wonder, like, how do they know that it's a disaster? 67 million in 1991 is a lot of money. When you consider this, I think Terminator 2 was like 1995, maybe. So it's not too far off that for like Bruce Willis, Blues Brothers heist action slapstick comedy.
Yeah, it does have a great cast though. So hopefully that money went into the cast. Obviously, a lot of it went into some of the set piecing as well. And they did a lot of things practically. So I mean, I hope that money was well spread and not just here, Bruce, you get 40 and we're gonna make the rest of the movie for 25. And I don't think that's the case, but I want to I want to pause for a second because I know on Twitter, you had posted something the other day about the way sort of like the performative industry trades have gotten into this. The Flash is trending to make less money than it's supposed to. Like, what do you mean it's supposed to? Either like it's this weird thing of like when you asked how do they know beforehand. So I'm curious if it's like, was this always something that the industry trades were very aware of, but because we were not plugged in and seeing it posted on social media, that we just were not accustomed to until even I think it's only the last like couple of years, as like every film that comes out during the summer is meant to hit a certain benchmark in order to be successful. And it's like, oh, The Flash only made $70 million in its opening weekend. It's such an abject failure. It's like, what? Like, that doesn't add up. This movie just made $70 million. Like, sure, it's expensive, but this movie will make its money back over time. And you shouldn't have to make it all back in your opening weekend. So I feel that similar kind of logic is applied to the criticism of Hudson Hawk here.
Successful movies, by virtue of Hollywood accounting, apparently don't make any money. So I don't think it's like Netflix releasing their statistics for X amount of households watch this film, or this film has been viewed X amount of times. It's like, but you're not showing us that, and how are you measuring that? Is it like when the film start to finish, did they watch the first 5 minutes? And it's no different with the tracking of box office. You were either going to see it or you weren't going to see it, regardless of how much money it took.
Yeah, and it's a lot of the accounts that are also like attached to film properties, and I don't want to call any of them out by name, but they're basically like film news websites, right? And then they all just spread around the same thing. It's like I see it 10 times a day from all these different sources, everybody retweeting it, and it's the same thing. Like, so it's just one story that, hey, realistically what it is Flash pre-sale tickets are not where the studio would like them to be. And then, it's tracking to not make enough money. It's going to be a financial disaster. It's like, those are not the same things. And the bar has just been set so ridiculously high that if a summer blockbuster that's a studio superhero movie does not crash the ticket service the day that the tickets release, it's like basically considered a failure at that point. And it's kind of sad, but it's interesting to see that this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that has been going on with big budget Hollywood movies that, have big stars in them and good cast for a long time.
Yeah. It's old as new again.
So we're going to get back to it. Washington Post gave it a 10 out of 100. And there's no name attributed, but it says merely airheaded where it should be lighthearted. Hudson Hawk offers a klutzy, charmless hero and wallows dully in limp, slapstick, and lowest common denominator crudeness. And I don't understand that. Like, there's not like really dick jokes going on or anything. There's not much of that kind of simple kind of what would they call it, like knuckle dragging humor.
No.
It's not that. And like we talked about, so many of those jokes are very well structured beyond how it services the screenplay and the story. So I don't think that is an accurate representation at all. And then we get into the 20s. So I'll let you pick Chicago Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, Variety, or the Austin Chronicle.
We'll go to San Francisco Chronicle.
San Francisco Chronicle. Mick LaSalle.
This is Zodiac speaking.
It says just awful. There is probably not one interrupted 60-second stretch in which a line of dialogue doesn't clunk, an action doesn't ring false, or an irritating plot turn doesn't present itself. And so this is a guy, I think, who took this movie way too seriously. He went into it thinking like, this is Die Hard 3 at the time, I think it would have been, and walked away being like, what is this alternate universe where all of this stuff is happening? And it almost is like that, where the universe that this movie takes place is not the same universe, the same reality where a Die Hard takes place, where Die Hard is, it's action heavy and everything, but it's trying to operate within the confines of reality. And as we've seen in this movie, like David Caruso's character is maybe a shapeshifter, or he's just got really good costume stuff with him at all times and happens to be very quick on the draw when it comes to, she has a red dress, I have a red dress too. So you can't expect this movie to operate in the same way that other Bruce Willis movies do. So I think that's just an oversight here by Mr. LaSalle.
Yeah, it's like you said. I think it's just not taking it at face value and just taking it far too seriously. And I find it funny that like none of them seem to mention like that. But as I say, like there seems to be a lot of like kind of laying it at the feet of Bruce Willis.
True. And we're getting to the more positive scores as we climb the ladder. So I'm going to jump over. That was a 25 out of 100. So we're going to jump over the 38, which was from USA Today. And we're going to go to TV Guide magazine that gave it a 40. And they say this one may be just excessive enough to develop a cult following. They knew it. It also provided quite popular with German audiences for reasons we've been unable to fathom. To think that the German audience would be the ones that really like had this humor click for them is surprising. But also, I think it's great, and I love that this person was able to understand that, like, look, I don't get this, but somebody's gonna get it, and then it's gonna develop a cult audience after this. So props to TV Guide magazine. Still only gave it a 40, but it takes us to the Chicago Reader, the highest score of the group at a 50 out of 100. So that's a 5 out of 10. And, the total IMDb score is a 5.7. So it's not that far off from the people who have reviewed it collectively. It says it doesn't have the polish or the momentum of an Indiana Jones adventure, which is, fairly accurate. And it isn't too engaging on the plot level. But at least the filmmakers keep it moving with lots of screwball stunts. So I think Mr. Rosenbaum here understands that this is not the Hollywood production that Indiana Jones is, and it's not meant to be. And he too, I think, looks at the simplicity of the plot of the 1, 2, 3, convict, leverage, resolution, and doesn't dig into that too much. And he knows that the filmmakers are having fun making this movie. So that is the nicest review we're going to get here, but I'm really glad that, this movie has 58,000 reviews. So it's not to the point where it's as high as some of the ones that I've seen on IMDb that were killed by critics, but then, have 500,000 reviews that have done a really good job of boosting the score up. But I really like that the critics seem to have completely misunderstood the tone of the movie, and I think it was ahead of its time. Like, its self-awareness and its sort of slapstick nature, and the fact that it wasn't openly a spoof movie like Airplane or like Naked Gun. Like, it didn't put its like hat in that ring, so to speak. It didn't want to associate with that because of probably the negative connotation that comes along with being one of those movies. It's like those movies serve a particular purpose. And even though they're enjoyable and they're funny and they do all these things, they're certainly outside the realm of conventional Hollywood blockbuster films. And so it was a brave move to sort of like try to make this movie and have it be successful. And I mean, I really appreciate what it does. And I really hope that the people that are going to listen to this who maybe haven't seen it will give it a chance. And hopefully we can rally the Hudson Hawk army and get this one climbing up the charts. But 5.7 out of 10 is really not that bad. It looks like it has its highest percentage of votes is actually 6s. So that would make sense. But 21% 6, 16% 5, 18% 7. So that's pretty good. 6s and 7s are the dominant two scores. So, when you look at it that way, that's not bad at all.
No, you'll take that. And I think it is shown that already because it stands out. It's the type of film that people watch now and go, my God, why don't they make films like this anymore? It's like, well, because nobody wanted to see that. Nobody went to see it at the time, which probably, what people appreciate now.
No, I agree 100%. And I would much rather have the filmmaker that I'm paying attention to, or, I would rather have the movie that I'm watching take some chances and be itself rather than, trying to be something else, trying to fit a particular bill because you need to please the producers and make X amount of money. And I think, I'm not here to necessarily be critical of the MCU or anything, but I think what we saw with the MCU, and I watch all the movies, and so what we
That's
saw
right.
was that after the point of the first Guardians of the Galaxy, there was almost an adherence to like we have to tell jokes in this way because this movie was successful. And I think it really hindered a lot of the movies that came after Guardians because those aren't being written by James Gunn, and it didn't let Guardians be its own thing, and it sort of had to hang on to this. Well, people want humor in their comic book stories, and they want this kind of humor, so everything was sort of trying to reach that bar rather than being its own thing. But then by the time we've come full circle and we see Guardians 3, it detached itself basically completely from the rest of the MCU, and I think was the best thing the MCU has done in a while as a result of that. So I appreciate that Hudson Hawk did its thing and did it the way that it wanted to do it, and didn't let, the pressures of this big budget really get in the way of it wanting to tell its story the way it wanted to tell it, with these big, bold, colorful, crazy brushstrokes, and to let a guy like Bruce Willis, who this is his only writing credit, to let him have the freedom to get involved in the creative process, to let him and Danny Aiello just have a musical number a couple times in the movie for, just the hell of it. And to play the whole thing out too, because you could be like, hey, these two guys are going to sing the song, and that's kind of their timing mechanism, and you get the point, and now we're cutting to the explosion. But they focus the energy on the things that it seemed that the cast was having fun with. And I think a really good example of that is the paralysis darts in the apartment at the end. Not the end, but like
Yes.
the final act, I would say. They think they've gotten away with it. The rogues gallery busts in and they dart them in the neck with these paralysis darts, and they're just stuck on the couch and then eventually on the floor, and sort of this whole thing of them trying to get enough feeling back in them, and the way the whole thing is structured, and the lady falls with the dart thing, and he blows the dart back the
He blows
opposite
back,
direction,
yeah.
and she gets paralyzed, and then she's like complaining that she got outsmarted by a nun or something. It's such a weird scene that really, I think, embodies like not just the colorfulness and the humor, but like the physical slapstick nature of the comedy as well. And it really hits the nail on the head there. And it was so much fun watching this.
Danny Aiello sitting beside him, and his shoulders are kind of bouncing up and down, and he's kind of like trying to stifle a laugh. And Bruce Willis goes, "Those better be tears coming out your eyes." And Danny Aiello's like, "They are," and it's clearly that he's laughing, pretending to cry. It's such a great moment.
Yeah, I really had a great time.
When you're talking about things being ahead of their time, one of the notes I have is that Bruce Willis's haircut was definitely ahead of his time. He had that kind of Peaky Blinders fade up to the back and sides, like 30 years before that was the thing. But I think the whole thing feels like probably like Bruce Willis homage to everything that he liked about movies, because like I don't know if he ever references it with that, but it does feel like a lot of the slapstick stuff feels very like Three Stooges-y. And then like he dresses like, obviously in his mind the coolest people were like the guys from the Rat Pack, because he dresses like a man from like the 40s and 50s, and like really high waisted pants and like the t-shirt, and he's like 4 earrings in one ear. It's like, this is clearly what Bruce Willis thought was really cool in 1991. And even when he goes to buy a tuxedo for the auction, and it's just the most like garish, weird looking tuxedo you've ever seen in your life. But crucially, and I said this to my wife, I was like, "Would you look at that tux and no tie or nothing?" And then I said, Bruce Willis obviously thought this was cool because nobody makes a joke about how silly that tuxedo looks.
That's a good point. He actually talks about like his brand new tuxedo being in jeopardy as they wheel him away, dangling out of the back of the ambulance. So
Yeah.
yeah, and there's not too many actors that are going to have the confidence to like pull that off, like with the earrings, and then to think like the hat, vest, t-shirt,
Yes.
circular sunglasses combo. Like I'm looking at some of the pictures on the poster, and it's like if this is not a comedy, like this is Bruce Willis as a villain in some other movie with the glasses and the hat. I'm like, that's a very It's almost like Natural Born Killers. He looks a little bit like Woody Harrelson in that. So I like that there's no real like identifying look for Hudson that sticks either. Like he's always looking different, like as the movie goes on, and it's just he's progressing through his different preferences.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think, like, as I said, looks like the costumes are generally very good across the board. It's just something like even like James Coburn and his green and red camo at the end. When he's in the fight scene, I was like, such a distinct choice for like camouflage. But yeah, it's a good looking film. And even like Richard E. Grant's suit and Andrew Bernhardt's costumes are really like perfect for that character.
Yeah, I think that's why I kind of like felt almost like these are like Batman villains because like the costuming is good. It's just elaborate and it's eccentric and colorful. Kind of like maybe Dick Tracy too, where they have a lot of these like big colors, like interesting cuts on the suits, and each character is very visually identifiable by the outfit that they're wearing.
Mm,
So I guess in comparison, like Bruce Willis like kind of dresses normal, but I mean like Danny Aiello dresses like a regular person in this movie. Like Bruce does not.
yeah.
I mean Andy MacDowell basically does too, but like basically everybody around them doesn't. And it's a lot of fun. It's fun to watch. It's fun to look at. I think the jokes are much deeper than they got credit for, and I don't think the budget, maybe not being recouped is the reason that this movie should get the kind of flack that it does. And you and I talked about a lot of movies that are similar in maybe tone or kind of familiar territory. And so I always ask my guests if you haven't seen Hudson Hawk and you want to give that person, a movie they may have seen that would help them commit to Hudson Hawk, or if they have seen Hudson Hawk, what's another movie that they may like based on that kind of taste?
Just very few films like it's not like there's films that like would have elements of it. Yeah, like an Ocean's film has that kind of stylized heist element to it. But the Blues Brothers has like that kind of the Blues Brothers would be close actually. It's kind of like the musical element. There's a kind of a manic energy to it. There's really peculiar non secular jokes. There's action. Yeah, like it's even though it's different in a way, I think Blues Brothers might be close. Another maybe because it's more of an out and out comedy would be like Three Amigos, but it has a weird it has a weird spoofy feel, but there's a little bit of earnestness and it's kind of an adventure and there's a couple of musical numbers. So it's that kind of wheelhouse, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I like that actually. I think Three Stooges is a pretty good one because that one had like not just the star power, but the guys that were comedic actors in the lead. So you sort of didn't get sold. You couldn't say that you got sold a false bill of goods here. So I appreciate that recommendation, especially, and I think a lot of people have seen Three Amigos as well, so
Mm.
it'll open up the door like to a wider audience. So I think that's a good one. I'm glad that you joined the film club because you had come and hung out with us a couple times when we did the spaces. But I liked your energy, and I was like, no, this is a guy we got to get into the chat and get him into the group. So I'm glad you're around and participating, and that we were able to come together and make a time to talk about Hudson Hawk. And I think, especially with being in a position where we're sort of forced to have a retrospective on Bruce's career because of his health issues, I think I am comfortable saying that Hudson Hawk is an important piece of his career. And I think that if you were to do kind of a comprehensive look at his catalog and pick and choose the movies that you would want from it. I mean, yeah, you got 5 Die Hard films, but do you need all 5? Maybe yes, maybe no, depending on who you are. But there's definitely you could get one Die Hard movie and get the picture. Whichever one that is, you could pick. But I think
Yeah.
a look back at his career is incomplete without taking a look back at this film and reevaluating it 30 years down the line. So I'm really, really glad that you brought this to my attention. And I'm super happy that I actually hadn't seen it, because I had totally confused it with the other one, the boat one. I still can't even remember the name of it. The
Striking Distance.
Striking Distance. Thank you so much. So Kevin, I appreciate your time. You know, it's not easy to coordinate when there's an ocean between us and 8 hours of time difference. So thank you so much. I will make sure to put your Twitter handle and the band information in the show notes so people can take a look at that and get in touch with you if they'd like. And is there anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
No, just thank you for putting in your time. I know it's kind of early there for you are, and thanks for what you do with the film club. I think it's a nice community that you have. That has a lot of good personalities, and it's kind of paying off in the quality of the episodes of this podcast that you're doing now. A lot of fun conversations we have, and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, hopefully so. I know I've got several lined up, and there was supposed to be, like, I have my list of who's in line, and I was like, all right, well, Kevin's technically in line here, but I was trying to schedule some other people, and it just didn't work. So I was like, all right, last minute, Kevin, I hope you're ready, because we've got to make this happen on short notice.
Yeah, the person on the other side of the world. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Right, I know. But again, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please have a great evening, and maybe we'll do this again in the future. I know there's some other movies out there that we could talk about for sure. So have yourself a good night, and we'll be in touch. All right.
Yeah, have a good one.
Take care. Thanks again to Kevin for joining me and sharing his love of Hudson Hawk with me and with you. We battled through our audio issues, so you didn't get to hear him tell you about his former band, Cursed Murphy vs. the Resistance, and I'll put that information in the show notes along with his Twitter handle. And of course, thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode. I know you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts, and I appreciate you spending your time with us. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you do, please consider leaving a rating and telling a friend about it. I'd also love to hear from you, so if you have a bad movie you love and or would like to be a guest on the show, you can contact me on Twitter or Instagram at badmovieswelove, LUV. This show is an extension of thesheist.com, and it is recorded, edited, and produced right here in the home studio by yours truly, and now it's fully integrated in the website too. So until next time, take care, be well, stay safe, and have fun however you get your movies.